The Democratic Alliance has refuted allegations that they will enter into a grand coalition with the African National Congress. Smaller parties at the National Coalition Dialogue have accused both the ANC and the DA of laying the foundation for the introduction of a threshold for their grand coalition. Deputy President Paul Mashatile says the coalition dialogue was way beyond political parties. Mashatile was delivering the closing remarks at the two-day event at the University of the Western Cape, which ended today. The dialogue, which brought together political parties and various sectors of civil society, was convened by Mashatile, who is also the leader of government, business and parliament. For more on the views of some of these smaller parties, we're joined now by the president of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, Mzanele. So a very good evening to Mr. Nyonso, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So you have dubbed it an attempt to try and save the ANC from going below 50%, but some of the political parties have seen this, and this was based on the comments made by Deputy Minister PAC saying, you know, some of this had already been discussed, leaving some to say that this dialogue was already a foregone conclusion. Are these sentiments that you share?
No. Evening to you, Tepis, and evening to your viewers. No, we don't share those sentiments, because we firmly believe that this was not a coalition dialogue, but a strategy to try and save ANC. A strategy to try and save a sinking ANC. And the reality is that in fact, it's an admission that they see that they can't make 50% plus one next year. And now there must be coalition dialogues. Why are they concerned about coalition dialogues? They have been telling us that they will govern until Jesus Christ comes. Is Jesus Christ around? Why now they call for these dialogues? No, they are trying to save the ANC, and it's a cause for concern.
What exactly concerns you? Because some have even characterized it as an ANC and DA versus smaller parties, particularly on the issue of thresholds. The parties, that is the governing party and the main opposition, saying that they agree that electoral thresholds should be factored into the creation of coalition governments, but the smaller parties, I believe, argue that this excludes them from democracy. Please outline this to us, your concerns.
No, of course, it is they are conspiring against democracy. Now, we are in a constitutional democracy and everyone has a right to say something. Now, they want to do away with smaller parties. In fact, it's so interesting how all of a sudden the ANC have just decided to work hand in hand with the DA. It's very interesting how they've been, their leaders have been uttering such statements that it's better to work with DA. It's better to work with DA, and it doesn't make sense for a formal liberation struggle, for a formal liberation movement to decide and work with DA, a white organization who is still working very hard to make sure that white privileges are protected. A party that today is oppressing our own people in Western Cape. I was in Cape Town on Friday. It was difficult to go. I was driving along N2 and I met thousands of old people walking from Cape Town to the townships because the DA-led government is just mistreating our people, is just ill-treating taxi drivers and taxi owners because that business is owned by black people. So I don't understand, how does the ANC think that they can work well with DA unless they are also serving the interests of the white people?
So the ANC has said
this thing of...
So, Mr. Nyonso, the ANC has said that it would consider doing that at local government level, but not necessarily a provincial or national government. And I understand while that may mean little to you, I'm very interested in the issue of these thresholds and the fact that the ANC says going into this that, you know, the legislation around coalitions has already been drafted. One would say, but it has been a subject of conversation, and when one looks at the modern South African state, that surely there would have been, you know, literature around that. Is that in itself a problem, or is it the fact that it's led by the ANC and the DA, both separately or parallel, whichever way they want to characterize it?
No, it is a problem. We don't support any minimum threshold because threshold is threshold and is designed by IEC. And we know how to get threshold, how to get seats in South Africa. Why all of a sudden they want to change it now? The reason we are skeptical about it is because the DA has been all out telling everyone that the votes for smaller parties are a waste of time. They've been paying billboards and writing those things that voting for smaller parties is a waste of time. We don't believe so, because everybody must have a say. Every constituency must have a say in parliament and a representation. So that's why we'll always treat it with skepticism. And it doesn't make a difference whether it is done at national or at local level. But the truth is they want to work together and do away with smaller parties. And unfortunately, we cannot accept that.
So what should anchor the transition going forward? If we're talking about a new state, whether it be a developmental state or not, Musoto Mweba of the IEC saying that according to the research that they've been looking at, that there's in fact evidence that shows that coalitions in themselves don't necessarily draw in new voters, that people actually become discouraged from voting. So as a concept, coalition governments, is it something that's out of the question for the PAC?
No, it is out of the question if it is not principled. Remember, we have ideological differences. So you can't go and form coalition. For example, you can't go and form a coalition government with Freedom Front Plus, who is saying this land belongs to them. Now it is definitely mean that we are going to fight it in the beginning of that coalition. I'm not saying coalitions must not be regulated, but why when regulating coalitions, you're coming up with issues of threshold, you're coming up with issues of trying to isolate smaller parties. That's where the problem is. But they can be regulated, but don't use it to deal with smaller parties.
But there's also the problem in tandem of some parties not being able to garner enough votes to allow them to govern, and in some cases forcing themselves into some sort of council agreements that some have said where votes are bought. So what must happen to ensure that there is no manipulation in the appointment of municipal managers, that it is a purely administrative process? In other words, you are somehow forced into these coalition governments that keep falling apart because there is no respect between political leaders on governance.
Remember the issue of employing municipal managers, Section 57, Section 58 managers. We have always been talking about that it must not be political. It has nothing to do with the government or ruling party. People should be employed there on merit. The problem, there's no service delivery at local government. It is because municipal managers are elected by the ruling parties and they elect their members. Now, if we can have a municipal manager who is employed according to his qualifications and outside politicians, but according to the merit, we will not have a problem. It has nothing to do with the numbers of council. It has been done by the ruling parties, not only the ANC, but also the DA. They've been employing their own people. And you see councillors who don't even understand the Municipal Council Act, but they would go to council and pass a vote of no confidence to the municipal manager because they are told by their political party that go and remove that municipal manager. A man who's holding a PhD or master's in administration will be removed by councillors who do not understand anything, but they were told, and they will tell him that you know nothing. So it has nothing to do with numbers. It has something to do with politicians trying to interfere with administration.
Okay, just a final question, but what I'm saying is, can this conversation be avoided though? It's been a long time coming, and we understand that it will need a constitutional amendment, and proportionality is in every aspect of governance in this country. So can political parties really run away from talking about coalition governments, regulation thereof, and how the legislation will work out for everyone?
No, that we cannot run away from it. At some point, we'll have to talk about it.
Okay.
But it must not be done in such a way that it is dealing with others.
All right. I thank you for your time. Much appreciated. Zanele Nyonso is the PAC president, just sharing their views about the coalition government dialogue that ended earlier on. It was convened by South Africa's Deputy President Paul Mashatile.